This episode of the Design Your Dream Home podcast is brought to you by Porcelanosa. With 30 showrooms in the United States and Canada, Porcelanosa is a luxury lifestyle brand that'll make your next project's dream into a reality. From a wide selection of tiles and mosaics to modern bathroom and kitchen cabinetry designs, Porcelanosa makes it easy to bring modern European design elements into your home. Visit porcelanosa-usa.com to learn more. You are listening to the Design Your Dream Home podcast with Doug and Steve. Doug and Steve are architects, and they're here to help you design your dream home.
Today our guest is Michele Hottel. Michele is an architect from California. She has been practicing since 1994. She is licensed in California and in Texas. Her firm specializes in single-family, multifamily residential, commercial, and small institutional projects. In addition to her work as an architect, she is a commissioner and subject matter expert for the California Architects Board and the City of La Mesa Planning Commissioner. I think that's California, right?
Yes.
And I know her from Twitter, and I know she's very active through the AIA and something called the Architalk blog series. And her blog is called "I've Never Met a Woman Architect Before." ... And this blog is about the trials and tribulations of being a woman architect, wife, and mother. And this seems actually really appropriate because it's Mother's Day was yesterday. So happy Mother's Day, Michele, and welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here, Michele.
Thanks.
Yeah, so now I see you on Twitter a lot, and we converse on Twitter. And like so many of our guests, it's like people that I know through Twitter, which is kind of interesting. I know you're active and as a not just as a practicing architect, but also with the profession. So we're happy that you'll join us today, and hopefully you'll share something about your blog.
Yes, I will.
Okay, so why don't you tell us a little about yourself, your practice? Where are you based in California exactly, and what is it that you do?
I'm based in La Mesa, California, which is the city that's directly east of the city of San Diego. So it's pretty much, you would never know whether you were in San Diego or La Mesa. And I'm a planning commissioner for the city of La Mesa. I have been I'm in my third term, so they're 4-year terms. So this is my 10th year, I believe, as a planning commissioner. I'm also the chair of AIA San Diego CRAN, Custom Residential Architecture Network. Yes, and I was the committee chair for the AIA California Housing Forum, which we just had at the end of March. And that was about getting through the roadblocks for attainable housing in the state of California. So that was an all-day forum at the end of March with Anne Foudron of Foudron Architecture was our keynote speaker, and then we had Doug McCauley from the state, and several panels, and we had different discussions on those based on housing attainability in California.
So you do a lot of sorry, good Doug. I was going to ask you about a community service because it's funny that that's the first thing you talked about, as opposed to, your firm or your work. You talked about your community service. That's interesting. So that's those kind of roles are very they take a lot of time. How is it that you're able to do both?
Well, actually, I had kind of stepped back from that because our oldest went to college, and I had kind of told another group. I was involved with the La Mesa Arts Alliance for several years, and I just really told them, like, I have to, which is a nonprofit with the city of La Mesa. So I said I have to step back from that and really work on, building my practice, because I was raising the kids, and so my practice was kind of like half time. And my husband's also an architect, so he was working full time for other firms.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So so I said, okay, I was going to move back into, to building my practice. And so that's what I did. And then 4 years ago, I started getting involved with, I had a blog since I think since 2012 or maybe 2010. I had set it up, but I had never written anything. So then I started following Bob Borson's Life of an Architect blog, and I kind of I said a couple things about women in architecture on there, and then he sent me an email and said, "Do you want to be part of the hashtag Architalks group?" So I I got into that. And then because a lot of them were members of the AIA, I got back into the AIA a couple of years ago. I joined again as a member, and it just all of a sudden I was asked to be on the housing forum committee, and then they asked me to be chair of the committee. So I don't know why I mean, part of it's benefit of promoting the profession, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I've always kind of thought of it as being, we have to educate the public about architecture and what we do. And it's not kind of like this elitist field where we only talk to people who, do high-end custom residential, who are doing multi-million-dollar projects. We can also help just the homeowner that wants to add on, a small addition to their house, so it's, and, a lot of people don't really know what architecture is about. So this is one way that we can promote the field.
So I'd love to hear how you got involved with the Planning Commission. And many architects kind of stand outside of those positions, and they're concerned that they're bureaucracies. So at the end of the day, it's really nice that we've got architects on commissions like that. And what's your perspective relative to the kind of people that you see coming through there?
Well, it is a bureaucracy.
Well, I'm glad you're involved.
Yeah. But like so many other things, when you take a set of drawings to the building department, right? You go through the planning department, you go through the building department. In high-end custom residential, a lot of times we do have to get a variance for something. Conditional use permits for commercial and institutional applications. So the reason why I applied for the Planning Commission is because of the work with the nonprofit, because with the nonprofit arts organization, it was part of the City of La Mesa Parks and Recs Department. And the person that was head of the Parks and Recs Department asked me if I wanted to apply for a Planning Commission position. And that was another one of my things, was I was like, well, I'm not going to do any more work that is not paid, right? Well, the Planning Commission position is $50 a meeting when we meet. So I'm like, well, it's still paid. And I applied, and then were approved by the city council. So it was, I guess it was probably due to my work in the community that I was approved for that. And I keep getting approved subsequently, so I guess they like what I'm doing. I don't know. I guess our planning commission is, I know a lot of planning commissions out there don't have a lot of architects on them. And our planning commission were 7, and we have 2 architects. We pretty much have always had 2 architects on it. And then kind of a community member, but she's involved with the city, but she also has a degree in engineering. And then we have a planner, and we have a person from the California State Parks who's the historical resources person. So I think our planning commission is pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure the architects that come through there appreciate being able to talk to architects.
Yes, and we also have, when interpreting the plans, a lot of times, I mean, even though that they're more, planning and zoning issues and not architectural design features, we can say, that is, like, if they wanted a big site wall, we'll say, well, why did you decide to put in like this 25-foot high site wall? When you could have stepped the project down the hill, so we can add things like that, and
Right.
and they can either say that they want to do that or not, right? I mean, a lot of times it's really not our purview to make those decisions for them. And we've had some people actually ask us if we could design the project for them, like, right, they'll say, well, what about this? What about that? And and I said, hey, I'm getting $50 a meeting here. I'm not going to design your project for you.
They just want to get it approved.
Yes.
I don't think people realize that those kinds of positions, they're not paid positions. I mean, they take lots of time. These are, I don't know, what is it, a 1 evening per week, and it can go to like 11 o'clock at night, and it's people doing it because they care about their communities, and they want to make sure that the design is, I don't know, in keeping with, I don't know, the more positive. Well, why don't you explain why is it that you do this? Why do you want to spend the time to basically volunteer your time when you can be with your family or practicing or whatever it is?
Yeah. we meet, the other thing I think that people don't really understand, or the general public or even other is that, it's not just the time that we're in the meeting, it's we get a huge packet
Right.
beforehand for every single item. So, there's a lot of reading to do. We go out to the job site. I don't think a lot of people, a lot of people that come in, they say, well, you should look you should look at this neighborhood. And we're like, we look at every single project. I said, we know, we've been to that neighborhood. Some people go several times to see the neighborhood at different times of the day. I mean, I pretty much know all of the, we're not that big of it. We're like 9 square miles, so we're not that big of a community. So I pretty much know all of the different areas, though there are some streets where, wow, I didn't even know this was in the city of La Mesa. So it's kind of creating, and the other thing is that, if more people would apply for the planning commission, I think maybe they would have more of a say in their community or city.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people say, well, they built that building and I didn't even know it went on. I didn't even know, I was never told about it. And I said, no, it goes out. If you go to the city website, you can say something about it. Also because of multifamily housing. And so one of the things that's kept multifamily housing, we're a million, are we 100,000, I'm sorry, it's either 100,000 or a million units behind every year. We have been for like the past 10 years. So now we're, a million units behind as far as what we need in order to house the state, so yeah, it's and the affordable housing levels, a lot of times people were saying, oh, those people that move into those places, and I said, well, those people are people that are college educated, and the 1-bedroom apartment is going for $1,400 a month. And a lot of the homeowners in the area just really, they don't know that housing is that expensive, right? Because they've got their house that they've lived in for 30 or 40 years, right? They bought when it was, $100,000. Some people on my street bought when it was, they bought their house for $25,000, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Long time ago.
So, yeah, a long time ago. And they just don't realize what the cost of housing is now, and that the affordable housing level in the Silicon Valley is is $140,000 for a family of 4. Yeah, so I think that the more that we tell the public about, what these roadblocks to housing are, and, approving these housing through different measures, and kind of explaining to people that, it's not going to decrease their property values. It's going to, build, it's going to build up the area, things like that.
So Michele, it's interesting we went this direction. I actually wanted to pick up on your blog because, we're this podcast is sort of aimed at homeowners, and I thought that this is sort of interesting. So let's say you meet somebody and they say, "Hey, I've never met a woman architect before." And how does that conversation go? I mean, you have ... So somebody meets you and you're an architect and they want to work with you. I mean, are there hurdles? I mean, what do you encounter?
I don't think it's so much for the home. It's funny because my husband and I are both, we're both architects. So, but when we meet somebody, they'll say, oh, and they'll say, oh, well, what do you do? And it's usually like somebody that we've known like for years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say, well, I'm an architect. And then they say, oh, well, I knew Steve was an architect, but I didn't know that you were an architect. And I said, oh yeah. And they said, and then they'll literally say like, oh, I've never met a woman architect before. And then that's kind of like where the blog like came out, because, some people have this thing like, oh, why do you have to call yourself a woman architect? And I said, well, I don't call myself a woman architect. I don't say, well, I'm a woman architect. I mean, people can tell I'm a woman. So usually, right? So I said, no, I'm an architect. I said, but then they come back with, I've never met a woman architect before. And I think with, somebody the other day at one of the AIA golf tournaments was saying like, oh, well, I could refer you work because I'm doing more commercial work now, so I can refer you more. And he was kind of saying like, oh, I think women work better with the homeowner than men do. And I said, well, I mean, I don't want to like put it down. I said, I think that if, I don't want to say that like women work better with the homeowner. I mean, you guys do customers. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we listen more. I think that was one of the things that women listen. This is what he had told me.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't what I said that I was good at. He said that women architects were good at listening more and not talking, though I'm certainly talkative. But I think, I think homeowners will say a lot of times, like, oh, I bet you didn't think that you were going to be a marriage counselor also with this. And I said, yeah, I wish I could bill people for that too. You can be the marriage counselor and the architect, and we can combine those two. Yeah. But I think most of the time I just kind of, there's a lot of decisions that need to be made, and couples can, they can get into arguments about these things, in front of you, and you kind of just say, you know what, why don't we just wait, a week or two? Like, you don't have to make the decision right now, talk about it when I'm out of the room, and
Right.
and I'm kind of more, I mean, if a person has a house that they, it's like they know how they work in their house. I mean, you can make suggestions about different spaces and everything, but they pretty much, and I think that I'm more, I'll listen to more of that than say, okay, I want, this is the way it's got to be, and I'm not going to do it any other way, because some of those things that we kind of do tend to say, like, okay, we really should do it this way. They're going to realize when we get further in the process that the architect is correct in doing these things, because we've done so, right? This is the house that this might be the only house that they built in their lifetime. And we've built, how many? I mean, I've probably worked on like hundreds over the years, because I've been working on custom residential since 1983, so it's a long time.
Yeah.
So Michelle, do you ever encounter things like, okay, let me just try to be like boorish and think, oh, do you do the engineering part of it too? Because that I feel like maybe that would be more like what Steven could do, because he looks like he would know that kind of stuff, when in fact that's my weakest. Or are you really strong in interiors? Do you get this kind of I don't know, response? Or
I actually don't. I think I don't, I don't know. I mean, it's funny because a lot of people say, like, oh, I didn't know that architects did the interiors, because I do like to pick out the finishes.
Mhm.
But a lot of times they'll bring it, either they have really strong ideas about what they want to do for the interiors, or, actually this project that I did in Coronado, the husband was much more into the project and had certain things the way that had certain ways that he wanted to do things. And, he definitely had ideas about different finishes that he wanted. And he was much more into the project than his wife was, actually, as far as picking finishes. So I actually had a conversation. I worked for a structural engineer in LA, because I worked in LA for 10 years. We lived in Venice Beach. And I worked for Gordon Polon, who does a lot of, he works with a lot of the cutting edge architects in cutting edge in quotes, in Los Angeles. And, I was talking to him a couple of weeks ago, and he was laughing, saying, he goes, yeah, at one point, he goes, there was only one, he goes, I only had one guy working in the office. Everybody else, he goes, I went out and then I looked around, and like they were all women that were working for him, so I've worked for a structural engineer before. So I think I do have more of a feeling for the structure than other people do, but I don't think that it's more I don't think it's more my gender. I think it's more of who I've worked for and what my talents are.
So you had said that you had one child that's in college now?
I have two in college now that she graduated.
And one graduate. Yeah. I was just wondering if they were interested in architecture.
Well, the
with,
one that
with two
actually
architects in the house?
the oldest, yes.
Really?
They're all, well, the oldest is, she's, she's 24 and she was the one when she did the testing in high school. She, she didn't tell us what they said, right? So one day we said, so what did they say you were good for? I think is the way I asked her. And she said, well, the first thing was architecture and I don't want that. I don't want to do that. And then the second thing was agriculture. She said, because she thought that, because she thinks that everybody who said that they liked animals got agriculture as their second thing. And the third one was hospitality. Um, she didn't want to do any of those things because she said, I said, well, you don't want to be an architect? She said, no, I don't want that lifestyle. And I said, okay, well, what type of lifestyle? Yeah. I said, what type of lifestyle do you want? So she actually she has a degree in social work.
Oh, awesome.
And now she was thinking that she was going to get her MSW, but now she said to a few of our friends when they said, "Are you going to go back and get your graduate degree?" She said, "Well, maybe I should go into architecture because I come to these AIA things and everybody says like, oh, are you an architect? Are you an architect?" See, so they're asking her, "Are you an architect?" But they, when I was there, I don't think anybody would have asked me if I was an architect, but they asked her if she's an architect. So
That's funny. Architects have very unique lives, and I would imagine having two architects in the house is pretty challenging. I guess for our listeners, I don't think people really understand how challenging the field is, and architects don't always make lots of money, and it's
no.
and they tend to be very interesting people, and it's
And we have three kids. So that's highly unusual for architects that they would have three kids. Or
right.
as people in other firms had said, three kids with one person. so so our kids are 18, 20, and 24, and the younger, the two boys, they're all creative. They're all very creative, and they all can draw and do things within the two younger ones, they actually are art majors, and our youngest is really into animation, and he has like
cool.
the best, yeah, and he's very visual, and he can just draw, but they're all very good about things, and they're creative. And then then they say things like the youngest said to me, he goes, when you're driving down the street and you look at a building and they've put everything into that design, it's like, he goes, there's just too much stuff going on. And he goes, it's almost like, they thought that they were never going to get another project again. So they put everything into that one building. And I was laughing, and I'm like, what other kid would say that? Probably
right.
like, only the kid of two architects would say something like that.
It's really perceptive. They were listening in the car while you and your husband were complaining about architecture.
Yes, which is the reason why I asked them about the three tips, because
Yeah.
they do a lot of complaint. And I think that that's one of the reasons why my daughter probably didn't want to go into it, because she just hears all of the complaints about the field, and we don't make as much money as the other professions, and
Yeah.
things like that.
Well, let's. I really don't want this to be a practice. Try to figure out how to get it so we can provide some resources for homeowners.
Yes.
So, what do you, in all the years that you've practiced and done lots of residential projects, like what give a homeowner some advice. Like what are you interested in, currently? What are some of the things you sort of look at these days?
As far as specific things, or
Well, I think we typically, everyone we've talked to, everyone has some sort of focus right now, and they're sort of, maybe it's a trend, maybe they're interested in sustainable design, maybe they're interested in working in a different way, like that they're incorporating design build. I think a lot of architects that I've noticed in designing homes, they're I don't know, they're sort of going in different directions. I think it's not like the conventional way or the way that people think we're all working. And I'm just wondering what sort of things are you sort of preoccupied with these days?
Well, one of the main things that I mean, I get a lot of the referrals from that call in to AIA for CRAN. And I think one of the first things about, the first tip that I have is, one, hire an architect, I think is the first tip.
Thank you.
Yes, because a lot of people they call the AIA and they're not the American Institute of Architects, and I'm referred to them because they have custom residential needs, and it's like I kind of go over, okay, this is how much it's going to cost to hire an architect, and there's a broad range, and I can refer you to 3 different people, and I can come and meet with you, and a lot of times they're like, well, I want to add 2,000 square feet. And, do I need an architect? I mean, I really just wanted a student and I want to pay them $500.
Right.
Wow.
And then I have to kind of go over, well, you're not going to get, I don't even think a student would do it for $500. And, there's a lot of benefits to hiring an architect, and we can go over them. And a lot of things are, people come up with it, with like a square footage amount, right? Like I need to add 2,000 square feet. And I think it's because they're thinking that they can add on this much for this much money. They're thinking $100 a square foot, right? Which we have to educate them about how much, like maybe you could add in some places in the United States, you could add on you could add on a bedroom for $100 a square foot, if you didn't have any wood floors
or a roof.
A roof.
Right.
We can do everything for you without the roof. Yeah. No roof. But so kind of educating them about the how much the construction costs are going to be, which I asked anytime that there's kind of a question that I'm, a blog question, a blog prompt that I'm kind of saying like, oh, what should I write for this? I'll ask my kids, like, okay, so I asked them like, what is like one tip that I could give homeowners? And they said, one of them said, budget, right? So one of them, it was like, make sure that they can afford the project. And then the other one was make sure that, so the number one was like the concept. So don't put all of your ideas in one design. The second one was plan for a home that fits your budget. And the third one was 10-foot ceilings, and remember to clear the trees for it. So basically that there's a lot of things that you're going to have to do for your project that you might not have initially thought that you were going to have to do, working around the trees, the topography of the site, and things like that. And as far as like different ideas, I tend to like modern personally, but I'm not against designing for, I do a lot of addition and remodels. So, so I'm typically, the homeowner wants to keep with the existing style that they have instead of totally redoing the entire house, which, again, adds cost. If you're going to totally change the style of your house, it's going to cost more to do that. And I think a lot of times maybe the homeowner won't realize that, okay, if we're going to totally change the whole, we're going to have to change the existing exterior of the house, all the interiors, in order to integrate it with this new, instead of, and I'm also totally fine with doing, having an existing traditional house and with a new modern addition that is kind of separated from it. I kind of like the old and the new with that. So what's big in homes now are, the big moving window walls, and opening up the areas a lot in the house, which I tell people, it depends on how, people want to open up the space a lot. And I say like, okay, you have to have, do you like everything? When people come over, do you want them to be in the space and see everything in your kitchen? Because it's nice that you have like a big open kitchen and it's open to the rest of it, but it's like you're going to be walking in and you're going to be seeing everything. Everything is going to be out. So if, so that's why you might want more of an enclosed kitchen or maybe a kitchen dining area and not want to like open up everything into the to the rest of the house. Because I think that's, it kind of goes back and forth, and every situation with someone is different. So,
so if a client came to you and said, I'd like to do this. This is my project. And then they gave you a completely unreasonable budget. They basically said, and we're only going to spend X amount. And it's like 4 times, lower than what it should be, or 10 times lower. How do you deal with that?
What I typically do is I'll say, and I mean, it happened to this one project. It's like, a project for a friend of a friend, right? So,
Right.
so you're kind of, I had told them, okay, for every, they wanted to, first it was like a kitchen and dining room remodel, and then they just wanted to remodel the 2 bathrooms, right? And I said, okay. And then they gave me their budget, and I said, okay, I think we can do it for that amount. And then they said like, oh, but then we wanted to add on over here. And then maybe we would want to add on over here. And I said, okay, so for all of the square feet that you want to add on, I said, that is adding this much more to the budget. Okay.
Right.
And I explained that a couple times, but what I like to do, and it's difficult right now because a lot of contractors are busy, is that I like to get preliminary estimates from people. So we get preliminary estimates from 3 people, and that kind of, after schematic design, maybe initial design development, and that like keeps people in line pretty much. I mean, because they're going to be able to say, hey, this is $100,000 more than what we wanted to spend. And then they realize like, hey, so before we get into all of the construction documents and we get a building permit for the thing, and we're getting bids at the same time as we're getting, the building permit process, right? And then all of a sudden we have a permit to add on all the square footage, and, they can't afford it.
Right.
So, yeah. Yeah. And until they kind of see the numbers, and, a lot of times they'll say, well, no, I wanted to do it for this. And it's like, well, you can't do it for that amount, especially not right now, when the economy is, well, there's a lot of construction, building construction, building materials are going up more and more every day. So even if somebody gives you a preliminary estimate, and 6 months goes by, it's like already those building materials have increased in, cost. So.
Right.
What do you think, Michelle, when somebody says that, well, I'll do a lot of the work myself? I get this, and I find it really complicates things, because they say, well, it's going to cost this, and they say, well, I'll do all the finish work myself, and I think, okay, I mean, that's possible. It just makes it more challenging, right? Because now I'm the architect supposedly overseeing administrating the work of the contractor, and now you're the contractor, I guess. So it's kind of a weird situation, and then I don't really have a good sense of the budget anymore. What do you encounter this sort of thing?
I discourage anything beyond painting. And one time we let somebody paint the house, and they decided to, oh my gosh. And the contractor that did it was super picky about paint, right? So he decided, so I did not tell them that they could paint. He said like, okay, you can paint. And then we like went in, and they had and I mean, I had a Girl Scout troop one time, so it's like, I know what but they had basically had their Girl Scout troop do the painting with, and this isn't like Girl Scouts versus Boy Scouts, but they had not even rolled it. They had sprayed it.
Were they all wearing masks? And oh my God.
I have no idea. It added about 4 weeks to the construction time, and then we went in afterwards, and of course there was overspray everywhere. Right. And the contractor was just like beside him. I mean, he was just like, wow. Yeah. He was just like, wow, I just didn't think. I'm like, yeah, I would have never agreed to that. But I just kind of tell people that it'll hold up, it'll hold up construction. Have you ever done construction before?
Good question.
Yeah. Which is one of the things, because one of the clients that I worked with on it's another project that I do with another architect, but he was kind of complaining about all these things in his house from this one contractor that he had worked with, and I said, well, what was he the lowest bidder, and did he have the experience to do the job? And I said, another thing is that, have you ever done this work before? Because people can be a lot pickier about the way something's done if they've never actually done that work before themselves. So, if you've ever had to stucco, you don't complain about anybody's stucco job unless you're a professional stucco person, but if you've had to get out there and try to do it, you realize that it's super difficult. So I would just say, like, how much do you have? Like, if they want to do the trim in their house and they're pretty handy, then they can do it. But other things like and also it's the liability for the contractor, right? He's not going to be able to say, okay, all of a sudden now this person is a sub on my job, right? I mean, you don't know whether they're doing things correctly. So for him to cover that stuff, it's like, what's he going to say? Like, oh, yeah, well, I'm going to cover this minus your work over here, or
I also find that I think that I appreciate that people want to find ways to save money, but to take away different parts of the contractor's sort of overall job, because people are very busy, it's that they just say, I don't need this. Like, you want me to do the job or not? And if you take away this or that, I'm not going to give you the full credit for that. I mean, I'm still here. I'm still doing this work, and now you're actually making me think more and do more, and it's a lot of savings for me. So, I mean, you can sort of tell. Like, I can say, you're going to lose this guy because they don't want to deal with all of this piecemeal stuff. Do you want them to do the job? It's not like there are so many other contractors that want to work, unless it's a big, huge, extensive something. But typically, if it's sort of an approach where I just want to do a little of this over here, a little bit of this over here, a little bit of that, I'll handle this part, you handle that part. It's like, I don't need this, right? This is what I encounter. I think that if you make it too complicated, especially for a smaller job or renovation job, it doesn't typically go well. It doesn't go well. You can't save money like that.
Well, no, and I mean this other job with the paint spray, also the husband wanted to do all the wiring for the speakers.
Right at night after work.
And I said, wiring for speakers? Like, people don't even wire speakers anymore.
Oh, this is recently. That's so great.
This is like within the last 5 years. But I mean, we've had wireless speakers I said, why are you doing wireless speakers? I mean, this reminds me of when we were doing high-end custom residential in LA, and everybody wanted all this wiring for telephones, right? Like, you had to have like telephone and TV and all these access in every single room, right? They were like, oh, we're going to have this, and technology has, it's like a phone jack in each room. Like, what is a phone jack? It's like you get one. So this wiring, and then he went in, and the holes that, I came in afterwards, and I was and I was like, oh my gosh. And I said, did you tell him how big of a hole you can put in a 2x4? It is, but so for these speaker wires, it was like this big in each 2x4 going through this. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on?
He only had huge drill bits. That's so funny.
Speaker wire, right? So,
I understand that speaker aficionados can be very picky about. I just had a guy who makes speakers tell me that they like to hardwire their speakers because Bluetooth is it's not always reliable. So anyway, they get a little weird. It's like people that like record players instead of listening to digital music. Anyway, so that's a funny story. So anyway, the Girl Scout spray thing sounds like a plot from a television TV show. I mean, that's so great. Well, we hired the Girl Scouts to come in and paint the house. So that's so
It was their
funny.
Girl Scout troop. It was like I was their Girl Scout troop. But yeah, it wasn't an outside Girl Scout troop. It was their daughter in the front. Yeah, it was just yeah. I mean, it adds more time to it adds more time to the process on our time. I mean,
Right.
I said there's a project that I've been working on for 8 years. It's a person that my husband used to work with at NAVFAC, and she retired and she wanted all this work done. And she thinks that the contractor is going to rip her off, and so she wants to, now all of a sudden she's decided that she wants to like get all of the subs. And then she keeps asking me all of these questions. And I said, okay, that's going to add to my fee because I have to do this. And I said, and I cannot coordinate all these people, and she wants to know all these other, I said, that's not my job. If I was going to do that, I would be doing design build, which, I do work with a contractor and we've done 2 spec homes together. So that's like a different process because I'm designing for, kind of a generic family, right? A generic family, a generic household. And, and because I'm working with the contractor, we can go through the process much, much quicker, right? Where with the homeowner, if you're working with a specific client, it's going to take more time, so.
Absolutely. Yeah, people don't understand how much more time they're adding by subtracting on their end. And it just is what it is.
Yes. And I mean, people who have used an architect or they've, come to me and, I mean, when I'm going over different decisions that they have to make, all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that that it was this much involved into my, into designing a house for us. I didn't know I was going to be making this many decisions for it. And, that's even true for one of my friends who does hospitality. And then he did his own house. And then he's like saying like, oh my gosh, all these decisions that I had to make. And he starts telling me about all these decisions that have to be made in custom residential. And I said, I've been doing this for 30 years. I said, I know all of those. I said, a lot of architects that are, that do other projects besides residential, they just kind of think like, oh, residential architects, they really don't do much or something, right? We're like at the bottom. The bottom of architecture, if you're like, you can do airports, and then at the bottom you've got like got residential.
Yeah.
And and I said I've been doing that. I said, we have to make all of those, all of those. And another thing with residential, typically we're in the process from the beginning to the end, right? It's typically, I mean, most of my projects, they're 2 years long, hopefully, right? So we get to see everything, and we're like the jack of all trades as far as seeing, we're planning things with them. We're going through the construction document, building permit phase, bidding and negotiation, picking a contractor, and then working on a lot of stuff in the field. If they want to make changes, we're making changes. I typically don't do the tile patterns for people until the end, because it always changes what they wanted at the beginning for the tile. Totally changed. So I don't want to keep changing those tile patterns and things over the course of the project. I mean, we do that towards the end of the project to kind of, when I go shopping with them for, for different things. So
that's interesting.
Well, so Michelle, we've approaching an hour now. So do you have any last thoughts? Any more helpful comments or resources that you can point our homeowners to?
I would definitely call up the AIA office and ask for CRAN if they're looking for an architect, and then
So we'll explain what that is, because I mean, CRAN is one of our sponsors, but I mean, why don't you explain what the acronym means and what is it they do?
It's the Custom Residential Architecture Network, and we specifically do, we have our own, it's a knowledge community, and for the American Institute of Architects, and homeowners can call up the AIA office and then get referred to our CRAN knowledge community, and then we can, I can ask them, I can answer different questions that they might have. We can refer them to different AIA architects in the area that specialize in custom residential. And, we have a symposium every year, and we go to that symposium and we learn different things. So we're constantly getting continuing education as far as helping, the homeowner. And we do a lot of, there's a house tour on that. So we're getting a lot of ideas from different, it's always in a different city. So we're getting a lot of different ideas about, what trends there are, what things work. And
I think that's a good tip because, we've had a lot of people talk about going to platforms like House to find architects, but not anyone really saying, well, why don't you go to the American Institute of Architects? They have this thing called CRAN, which is the Custom Residential Architects Network. And basically they're not trying to have a profit. It's not like you have to pay them, but basically it's a resource. And they want to help you make a good decision. They want to answer your questions. It's free. I mean, just reach out to them and they can point you in the right direction and also recommend architects that are in good standing, that are good quality. So I think that's a great tip. I need to get on that list. How do you get on that list? We need to get on
too. Holy cow.
Well, see, that's one of the things that we're compiling at our office, and we've got, our executive director, but then we also have a new person that's coming in that she's going to be the next director, and she's really on it. So we are compiling different lists of people's specialties, maybe that they can also have a link to any website they have or examples of their work on there, so they can actually go on and look at our directory and kind of do that. So that's and so because right now they're calling up and we say, okay, here's 3 people, and then a lot of the smaller projects, because a lot of people are busy right now, it's difficult to to get people to do it. So I'm doing a lot of that work as far as talking to the people, going out to their project, seeing like, okay, not giving them free ideas. We don't really give people free ideas. And I think that's, if it's my own practice, I'm charging an initial consultation fee to people when I go out there and then I can give them a proposal for the work and things. But just get on call your local chapter of the AIA and then get and ask to speak to the Custom Residential Architecture Network person, and they can get you, or just leave all of your information. It's hard getting all these databases together. That's why we have the executive directors and the directors at the AIA offices, because they're mostly business people. And they like to do all these spreadsheets.
Well, Michele, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great to have you
today again.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Design Your Dream Home podcast with Doug and Steve. If you have any questions or want to give us any feedback on the show, feel free to reach us through our website at thedougandsteveshow.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.